Hello, Unravelers. Welcome back to Tiff Unraveled. If you're new here, then welcome. I'm so happy to have you. I am Tiff. I need you to stay with me today because this story is just another descent into the kind of madness that continues to test my faith in humanity. It's a story that is going to make you want to turn it off. It's going to make you want to turn it off, but do not. Don't. You can't. We can't. We owe it to another little girl. Her name is Jacqueline Torres Garcia, and we owe it to her to bear witness. On October 8th, 2025, police in New Britain, Connecticut, got a call about some suspicious activity at an abandoned house. And in the yard of that abandoned house, they found a plastic storage bin, and inside that plastic storage bin were the remains of a child in a very advanced state of decomposition. They called her Mimi. Everyone that knew Jacqueline and loved Jacqueline, they called her Mimi. She was 11 years old when she was taken. It appears that she was malnourished, starved to death by, once again, the very people who are meant to protect her. I'm not here today to whisper about another tragedy. I'm here to scream about another atrocity, because this was not a secret. This was not a child who fell through some cracks. In my opinion, this is a child who was known to the state of Connecticut for every single second of her 11 years on this earth was in someone's case file. And she was just apparently a line item, another box to be checked. And while the state of Connecticut was checking its little boxes, a little girl was being systematically erased from this world. This is the story of a coven of monsters who called themselves a family. And once again, the army of bureaucracy who might as well have just held the door open for them. This is the story that should make your blood boil. And if it doesn't, maybe check your pulse. Let's talk about Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. Let's unravel. Before we talk about the monsters, because we have to, unfortunately, let's talk about the beautiful little girl that they took from this world. Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. For the first 9 years of her life, she was safe. She was loved from the moment that she was born in January of 2013. She was already on the radar of the Connecticut Department of Children and Families, DCF, because her mother was in a detention center when she was born. So DCF did what they were supposed to do for once and placed her in the care of her paternal grandmother, who at that time became her legal guardian. And in that home in New Britain, Mimi had a childhood. She went to public school from kindergarten to 5th grade. She had teachers. She had friends. She had grandparents, Patricia and Felix Delgado, who loved her and never stopped fighting for her, by the way. Her father, though estranged from her mother, did try to stay in her life. He started filing for visitation in July of 2023 with a very simple, desperate plea on a court form that said, "I want to see my children." She was a real little girl. She was so visible. She was so known. And for 9 years, she was okay. She was good. But on the periphery of her life, the monsters were circling. And in 2022, the state of Connecticut unlocked the door and let them in. So, to understand how this happened, unfortunately, we have to understand the three people who are accused and being charged with taking her life. This wasn't a sudden snap. In my opinion, this was a culmination of violence, neglect, and again, just in my opinion, sociopathy. that the state had documented and actively ignored. I don't want anyone to think that I come down too hard on agencies like Children and Family Services, but I know that they are overworked and I know that they are underpaid, most likely. And I know that they have a lot of stuff to work through. But unfortunately, that causes these cracks to form. And so at what level do we start trying to fix this, because it's a problem? But let me not get ahead of myself, okay? Okay. First, let's talk about Mimi's mother. Her name is Carla Garcia. There she is, Carla Garcia. Yes, 29 years old. DCF knew her from the very day, even before, at least from the very day that Jacqueline was born, in a detention center. They knew her criminal history, which included a 2018 conviction for third-degree assault. They knew that she was in a relationship with a man who had a criminal record, and yet they supported her petition to regain custody. Um, mm, and I hear a lot of, analysis and things saying, well, the goal is always to reunify children with biological parents. Why? Why is that always the goal? I can understand it being a goal if suitable, but why is that always the goal? Why isn't the safety of the child first and foremost? Why isn't that always the goal? I'm just curious. Because, and it's not like I have no reason to say these things. I'm so sick and tired of having to talk about cases like this. I will always talk about cases like this because it's so necessary. It's so necessary. But why? Once this woman had Jacqueline, once she regained custody of Jacqueline, she systematically started isolating her. She cut her off from her grandmother. She cut her off from anyone, really, who cared about her. She was fighting her father's attempts at visitation. And eventually, she got a judge to grant her sole custody in June of 2024. After she starved her own daughter to death, what was her primary concern? Not guilt, not grief. She told police that she was saving notes on her phone about the abuse because she was planning to go on a podcast to share her daughter's story. What? This is a woman who saw the unaliving of her own daughter as fucking content, as a branding opportunity. And if that isn't enough to curdle your blood, records show that in January of 2025, just 4 months after police believed that she had killed Mimi, Carla Garcia gave birth to another baby, another human baby brought into this world. Right. Next, let's talk about the boyfriend. His name is Jonathan, not Jonathan. I'm speaking correctly today. Jonathan Nanita. He's 30 years old. He apparently was like the enforcer, okay? He had a 2020 conviction for reckless endangerment, and according to Carla's own confession, mom's own confession, he was an active participant in the abuse and starvation of Mimi. According to Mimi's grandmother, he knew about the abuse. He had the father's phone number, and he never once made a single phone call that could have possibly saved this child's life. He didn't care about that. He didn't care about that. When Mimi's tiny, emaciated body finally gave out, Carla told police that it was Jonathan Nanita who brought the body downstairs. She said it was Jonathan Nanita who allegedly packed her into that plastic tote, and it was Jonathan Nanita who police believe was the person seen dumping that tote in the back of that abandoned house like a piece of trash. And at his arraignment, while the Garcia sisters sobbed for the camera, he remained completely stone-faced, no emotion, not a care in the world. And finally, have Mimi's aunt. Her name, also Jacqueline Garcia. She is 28 years old, and in 2022, which is the same year that the Division of Children and Families gave Mimi back to this family, Jacqueline was convicted of risk of injury to a child, her own 11-month-old daughter. In fact, according to the arrest warrant, that baby was brought to the hospital with multiple bruises and, get this, multiple fractures that were in varied states of healing all over her body, everywhere. She was sentenced to 10 years, suspended after 18 months with 5 years of probation. She was released from jail on August 15th, 2025. And who was her sponsor? Who did the state allow this convicted infant abuser to live with? That would be her sister, Carla Garcia, the mother of Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. This is the woman who lived in the home with Carla and Jonathan from June until August of 2024 and witnessed what she called, quote, patterns of abuse and neglect, unquote. You have some nerve, ma'am. You have some nerve. She saw Jacqueline being confined to a corner. She saw Jacqueline. And when I say Jacqueline here, I'm talking about Mimi. I'll refer to her as Mimi since there are two Jacquelines and one is the victim and one is a perpetrator. So she states to investigators that she saw Mimi confined to a corner. She saw Mimi restrained with zip ties. She saw them starving Mimi. And then she told police the single most damning sentence in this entire sordid case. When she left the home in August of 2024, she, quote, knew she was going to die. Yeah, she says that she knew that Mimi was going to die. She knew. And you know what she did? She walked away. She walked away from the home. And these are the people that the state of Connecticut deemed fit parents. This is the family the DCF put Mimi back in a home with. It's not a failure. This is an abomination. 2 minutes. So, with sole custody secured and the last of the dissenting voices silenced, Carla Garcia made her very final move on August 26, 2024, the first day of 6th grade. She walked into Jacqueline's school and formally withdrew her, filing a notice of intent to homeschool. In Connecticut, a state with some of the weakest homeschooling oversight in the country, that is all that it took to make a child disappear. No wellness checks, no curriculum approval, no mandatory assessments. It is a loophole that is sometimes tailor-made for monsters. Now, again, I've touched on this before. Do not for 1 second get me wrong in what I'm saying here. I myself homeschool my high school daughter, one of them. There is absolutely nothing in this world wrong with homeschooling your child, especially if it's right for the child, if it's right for you as a family. In this case, I have a mixed situation. I have one child who attends public high school, one child who attends home instruction high school. But let me tell you something, at least in my county, and I know in a lot of states, there's a lot of attention still being focused on these homeschool children. Every year I have to provide a curriculum. Every year I have to prove to my state why I am qualified to provide this home instruction. Every year, at least twice throughout the year, the county that I live in kind of checks in and there are mandatory assessments. I have to go to in-state proctored testing. People are laying eyes on my child. I have to attend, benchmark testing, sometimes like 2 or 3 times a year is at a proctored site. I have to attend the state SOLs. In my state, they're called SOLs. I'm not sure in every state, but that's standard of learning, that big end of year, state mandated tests. My homeschool child still has to attend these proctored sites where people are laying eyes on them, and apparently in Connecticut, there isn't really any of those things. So, and again, I don't live there. This is just from some of the reading that I have done. There's a lot of oversight in this state, and not only this one, in many of them. So now with Mimi, pretty much completely isolated, the torture escalated. Reportedly, Carla admitted to police that she and Nanita, her boyfriend, stopped feeding Jacqueline completely for approximately 2 weeks before she died. And then the date that we reportedly have right now is September 19th, 2024. And this is when Mimi's little body finally just gave up, gave out. Here's a thing that happened. They kept her body in the basement of their Farmington home for months. Carla told police that the smell of her daughter's decomposition, quote, was so strong they had to leave their residence and stay with friends or in hotels, unquote. Ma'am. Oh, I get enraged. Think about that. The stench of their own crime was so vile, it drove them from their own home. But it never drove them to a police station. Didn't do that. They wouldn't go that far. When they moved from Farmington to New Britain, Nanita actually packed Mimi's remains into that storage tote that she was found in, and they brought her with them. Yeah. In January of 2025, 4 months after Mimi was taken, DCF got another call about this same family allegedly harming one of Mimi's younger siblings. So they opened a case and they asked about Mimi. Carla, the consummate liar, said she was being homeschooled and was temporarily out of the state with a relative. 5-alarm fire. Ring the fucking bells. Right? Red flags everywhere. Boom, 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 boom. Red flags. A family with a decade-long history and now a new harm allegation and a child who has been pulled from school. Now, all of a sudden, everyone's unreachable. They're all unreachable. What did DCF do? Did they call the police? No. Did they demand proof of life? Also no. They conducted a video call with a person who the mother claimed to be Jacqueline. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Sorry, when I say Jacqueline, I mean Mimi, not the horrendous, monstrous aunt of Mimi, but Mimi. So they conducted a video call. Carla put a child on the call that she was claiming to be Mimi. That wasn't even Mimi. You know why? Because Mimi was already no longer with us at the time that this video call took place. They were duped by an impersonator while an unalived child lay in a storage tote somewhere in that very house. And with that, they checked their last box, right? They closed the case finally in March of 2025. I'm sorry, but this is not just negligence. This is bureaucratic indifference. Again, I know the case files, the piles of files are probably, as tall as me. But something has to be done to correct that, because this just ends up becoming, because these people are so overwhelmed, overworked, underpaid, it becomes indifference, right? That is tantamount to complicity. I see this in healthcare. I see healthcare workers becoming so burnt out that they stop giving a shit. And that's when it's time to get out of healthcare. And so I feel like kind of the same thing applies here, right? Again, it's no wonder, okay? At the time, the state's two top child welfare positions, right? The DCF commissioner and the child advocate, they were vacant. The entire system was completely rudderless, adrift in a sea of fucking apparent incompetence. Just before Mimi's body was found, a federal report actually concluded that Connecticut's DCF was failing to meet all of their federal markers for success and needed to be placed on a performance improvement plan. You think? Okay, again, we're sick of this. We're sick of this, right? The heartbreak, right? From watching these vigils, these beautiful, thoughtful teddy bear memorials, right? All of these tearful press conferences from politicians who are going to forget a child's name by the next election cycle. Yeah. We're sick of hearing about more and more and more children who were known to systems that continually do nothing. However, rage is a useless emotion unless you channel it. So let's channel it. Let's channel it. What can we do? What can we do? Well, at the very least, we can become a firestorm. I know anybody who follows me. I know you all have it in you. We could become a firestorm. We could become so loud that eventually we can stop being ignored. Okay, so first, demand legislative action. Don't forget that these politicians work for us. Make them work. If you live in the state of Connecticut, find your Connecticut state legislator, okay? The contact information is public. Call them, email them, show up at their offices and demand three things. Demand that they pass what is now a bill trying to become a law. We all remember that song. Okay. Mimi's Law, right? Close this entire homeschooling loophole that allows abusers to hide their victims in plain sight. Okay. Mimi's Law would require in person checkups, wellness checks, right? It would require proof of education. And it's not about punishing responsible homeschoolers. Okay. It's about taking that weapon away from monsters like this. Also, demand a complete top to bottom overhaul of DCF. No more internal reviews, okay? There has to become, we need funding at state levels. Why is this always so overlooked? There needs to be funding for more caseworkers, better training, smaller caseloads, and a zero tolerance policy for the kind of criminal incompetence that let Mimi and so many other children like Mimi die. And demand accountability. The caseworkers and the supervisors who signed off on returning Mimi to this house of horrors, right? Who closed the case after seeing her in September of 2022 and who accepted a video call as proof of life for an unalived child. This kind of stuff has got to be investigated. It has to be investigated. Support the people who help. There are so many organizations on the ground in every state fighting for children every single day. Every single day. They are also underfunded and overwhelmed. They are trying to find them, donate to them, volunteer for them. Anything. The Center for Children's Advocacy, right? In Connecticut specifically, there's the Connecticut Children's Alliance. There's the Office of the Child Advocate. Call these places and demand that they use this power that they have for real change, whatever little bit we can do. And finally, be the person who makes the call. Be the person. Stop saying it's none of my business. It is so your business. It's all of our business. We cannot all be legislators. We cannot all be lawyers, but we can be neighbors. We can be the person who sees something and says something. And the tip in this case, right? We know the girl who called. We've seen her on interviews with local news stations in Connecticut, right? That tip is what finally brought Mimi's body to light. She saw something, she said something. She didn't like it, didn't sit right. She picked up the phone, she made a call, and Mimi was found. If you see a child who looks hungry, if you see a child who's covered in bruises, if you know of a child who all of a sudden you just haven't seen in a while, they disappear from school, they disappear from the neighborhood, just make the call. Just make the call. It doesn't hurt. And you might be the only chance that these children have, period. Jacqueline Torres Garcia was betrayed by her family. And in my opinion, she was betrayed by the state that she lived in. So let's not betray her memory by letting her story fade away. It needs to be talked about. They all need to be talked about. Let's make their names our battle cries. Let's make sure that these children stop ending up in sterilite containers in backyards because the people who have the authority to do something, the people who are in charge, are just either too lazy, too cowardly, or too incompetent to do their jobs. For Mimi and for every child like Mimi, the ones I've covered in the past and the ones I'm sure I will have to talk about in the future, we have to be better than this. We're going to follow this case as it proceeds, as it continues. It's active, it's ongoing. So I hope you guys will be here with me for that. Thanks for hanging out with me on this Tuesday afternoon after work. And, I hope everyone has an amazing day. We're halfway there tomorrow. Tomorrow's Wednesday. You've made it. I'm so proud of you, as always. And until I see you guys again later this week, please stay safe. Keep asking questions and keep unraveling. Love you.